Hello, and welcome to the overview of the new Massachusetts English Language Proficiency Standards for Adult Education, Part 1, an Introduction. We recommend that you print out a copy of your Massachusetts English Language Proficiency Standards and have it with you during this introduction, as I will be referencing it, and it will be easier for you to view it up close in your own copy. This session is the first of three and is designed to introduce you to the new document, give you some background as to why and how it was created, give you a brief look at what you will find within the document, including some terminology and definitions, and we'll look at what's new and what has stayed the same. Session 2 will zoom in on specific standards and benchmarks, and Session 3 will start to look at how you can use the standards and benchmarks in your instructional planning and classroom practice. Please remember that this is a brief overview and that more in-depth explorations into how to use the new ELPs will be available through other professional development workshops. What are the Massachusetts ELPs for adult ed? They are a single set of standards or objectives for adult English language learners to work towards that will help them develop both their language skills and their college and career readiness skills. The Massachusetts ELPs for adult ed are essentially a combination of these three documents: the Massachusetts ABE Curriculum Framework for ESOL, the College and Career Readiness Standards for Adult Education, and the National English Language Proficiency Standards. In addition to these foundational documents, the Massachusetts ELPs were also informed by the Oregon Adult Basic Skills Learning Standards and the Educational Functioning Level descriptors from the National Reporting System. You may be wondering, with all of these standards for adult English learners out there, why Massachusetts wanted to create yet another. Well, the goal of the Massachusetts ELPs for adult ed was to create a single document to guide rigorous language instruction for ESOL learners that would both prepare them for post-secondary education, job training, and family-sustaining careers, and also provide them with the necessary language skills and support needed to meet those standards. Our timeline here starts with the Massachusetts ABE Curriculum Framework for ESOL, originally written in 1999 and revised in 2005. They've been used by adult ESOL programs in Massachusetts since this time. And while these standards and benchmarks describe the language, knowledge, skills, and strategies for English learners, they do not explicitly focus on the academic rigor, as they predate the CCRS by nearly 10 years. The CCRS came along in 2013 for adult learners. These were derived from the K through 12 Common Core standards with the same attention to the development of skills towards college and career readiness. They also emphasized the instructional shifts to increase the rigor in adult ed classrooms, to increase complexity, have learners ground evidence from texts, and build knowledge along with their developing literacy skills. Most states adopted the CCRS for their adult education programs, including adult ESOL programs. These standards were written for native English speakers, not second language learners, and were therefore lacking the language development support needed by second language learners in order for them to meet the CCR standards. This was particularly an issue at the beginning ESOL levels. From 2013 until now, adult ESOL programs in Massachusetts used these two sets of standards: the Massachusetts Curriculum Framework to attend to language development skills and the CCRS to attend to the more rigorous instruction. This was not a perfect fit. Meanwhile, on the national level, adult ESOL programs around the country were grappling with the same issue of how to help adult English learners develop the kinds of language skills they would need in order to meet the CCR standard. In 2016, the English Language Proficiency Standards were developed by the American Institutes for Research. These standards were intended to be used alongside the CCR standards to provide the language lift for English learners so that they can meet the CCR standards. And these were invaluable to those states that did not already have their own ESOL standards for adult ed. Massachusetts, of course, did already have a valued set of standards in its curriculum framework for ESOL, so the national ELPs were used to inform their revision, not to replace them. In 2019, the Massachusetts ELPs for adult ed were completed, and the goal of establishing a single document that identifies both language and college and career readiness skills has been met. Before we delve into the document itself, let's take a quick look at how the Massachusetts ELPs were developed. Once the decision was made by the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to create a single set of rigorous adult ESOL standards, additional parameters were set regarding the process. specifically that the development of these standards be inclusive of Massachusetts ESOL practitioners as well as national subject matter experts. A principal writer and an assistant, both from World Education in Boston, were contracted in 2018 to begin the process and were supported by a team of reviewers and contributors from the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, the SABES PD Center for ESOL Curriculum and Instruction, teachers and directors from over a dozen Massachusetts adult ESOL programs, and experts from across the country, including some who had helped develop the national ELPs. In February of 2019, the Massachusetts ELPs were completed. So that's a little background. Now let's take a quick look at what's in the Massachusetts ELPs and at some of the terminology. The Massachusetts ELPs are organized according to strands, which are categories of knowledge within the study of a given discipline. In the Massachusetts ELPs, the strands are the language skill areas of reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And then, of course, there are the standards. Standards state in broad terms what learners are able to do. In the Massachusetts ELPs, there is a total of 15 standards. They cover the same 5 topics, seen here on the list, across the 3 strands. So, for example, Standard 1 for reading, writing, and listening and speaking all focus on meaning. Standard 2 in all 3 strands focus on organization and style. Standards 3 on the components of English, Standards 4 on the use of effective strategies, and Standard 5 on the use of diverse media. Within each standard are threads, which are subcategories for organizing the benchmarks within a standard. And benchmarks are level-specific standards, the specific skills and knowledge learners need to develop and demonstrate at a particular level to meet the more broadly stated standard. The benchmarks describe exit-level performance. When comparing the new Massachusetts ELPs to the old ESOL curriculum framework in Massachusetts and the CCRS, you'll find that several elements are the same. The instructional shifts from the CCRS are woven throughout the Massachusetts ELP standards and benchmarks. The Massachusetts ELPs also include both language skills and college and career readiness skills. There are still benchmarks, and they're called benchmarks as they were in the curriculum framework. There is still a strand called Navigating Systems, as there was in the Massachusetts curriculum framework, and that has been updated, but the essence of it is the same. And just as in the Massachusetts curriculum framework, there is consistency among the standards across the strands. For those of you who have worked for the past few years with the Massachusetts curriculum framework and the CCRS, there is a good amount in the new standards that will look familiar to you. That said, there are many elements that represent significant improvements from the previous documents. For one thing, as mentioned already, the language skills and academic skills are integrated into the individual standards and benchmarks instead of in 2 lists. The language lift English learners need to meet the CCR standards is woven through the standards and benchmarks. There are now 3 strands instead of 4. They are reading, writing, listening, and speaking. The language standards from the CCRS are now called the components of English in the new standards, and they're written for English learners, not native English speakers. The unleveled standards for intercultural awareness from the Massachusetts curriculum framework have been updated to emphasize civic awareness, and they're now called civics. The strategies and resources for learning standards were considered not specific to English learners and so were not included in the new standards. The levels in the new document now align to the educational functioning levels of the National Reporting System, not the SPLs that were in the curriculum framework. The NRS EFL levels begin with Level 1, Beginning Literacy, and they go up to Level 6, Advanced ESOL. The notation system, though very similar to the notation system of the curriculum framework, has the addition of that thread level. We will look at each of these as we continue our exploration of the Massachusetts ELPs for adult ed. What we've covered so far is how and why the Massachusetts ELPs were developed. We touched on the contributing documents and some terminology and definitions, and we looked at what has and has not changed. For sessions 2 and 3, we'll go deeper into the document. We'll see how it's organized. We'll look at specific strands, levels, standards, threads, and benchmarks. We'll look at the progression of the benchmarks through the levels, and we'll look closely at the notation format. We'll also look at how you can use the document, how the different layouts lend themselves to different uses, and how increased rigor is woven throughout the Massachusetts ELPs for adult ed. Please click on Session 2, and we look forward to our continued work together on our new Massachusetts English Language Proficiency Standards for Adult Education.